Hi, everyone. Jake Robinson here for Turf Health 101. We're going to get started here. So I hope everybody's in the right place. Turf Health 101, maintaining a healthy and sustainable turf landscape. Little introduction, I'm Jake Robinson, the City of Greeley's water efficiency specialist. I have 10 plus years of experience in the landscape and water industry. I have a number of qualifications and certifications. I'm assisted by Ben Schaefer, the water efficiency coordinator, and he's going to be kind of monitoring the webinar chat. If you have any questions, go ahead and toss it in the chat, and Ben will get those questions to me. So today on the agenda, we're going to talk about why healthy landscapes are important in Greeley, soil types, soil textures, and why it's important. Common issues and solutions when it comes to soil and turf health, seed and sod, establishment watering, mowing and maintenance, and a fun at-home activity you can do. So why are healthy landscapes important? There's a lot of talk out there that turf is like not great and that uses a lot of water, and that is true. It does use a lot of water. A lot more water than xeriscape or Colorado native plants. But in Greeley, what we want to really focus on is just any kind of healthy landscape, no matter what it is. And the benefits of that are the shade and the cooling effects landscapes have. Compared to just dirt or rock, a healthy green plant is going to keep your home and your neighborhood a lot cooler. It prevents a healthy soil, healthy plant. They can fight off pests a lot better than, struggling plants or, just weeds or nothing at all. Healthy soils and healthy plants, those root zones really hold onto the soil. So it stops erosion and dust. Property values and community aesthetic, a beautiful landscape will actually, make your neighborhood look really nice. And then fire risk. I grew up right outside where the Marshall fire happened a few years ago. So this is kind of important to me. A healthy landscape will prevent fires spreading faster if that day ever comes. All right, soil. Soil is like the backbone of any plant, obviously. So it is really the foundation for the growth. It provides essential nutrients, water, and air for that plant to grow. It also contains a lot of microbiome kind of aspect of it, where it's facilitating this like nutrient cycling process. So it's super important to keep soils healthy for the plants and the other microbiology in there. So what is soil exactly? This is a USDA soil texture triangle, and soil is made up of three main components: sand, silt, and clay. A combination of those three is something called loam, and it's like the ideal soil texture for plants growing. So in Greeley, sand is a fast draining, low nutrient retention type of soil. Water just flows right through it. There's a lot of airspace in there that can't really hold on to a lot of nutrients. Silt is kind of in the middle right there, moderate water retention, some nutrient availability for that plant. And then clay, which we're going to talk about a lot in this class because that's the most common type of soil in Greeley. That has high water retention. All those soil particles are really squished together, and it likes to hold on to that water really tightly, almost so tightly that either water can't go through it at all, or the water that's in it isn't available for the plants to grow. So poor aeration, poor drainage in clay soils. And the soils are classified as a percentage of those three, right? So in Greeley, here in you can't see my mouse. Okay, so here in Greeley, we kind of have this like clay loam, kind of right in the middle of that big triangle. It can lean over to clay, sandy clay or silty clay a little bit. We're right in between the Platte and the Poudre rivers. And so over the years that they have deposited a lot of sediment in this area as well as clay. So it's a bit kind of a combination of all that. Our goal is to get that loam. If you head up further west, towards like Fort Collins with Loveland, you're going to hit really clay soils, way more clay than here. If you head out east, especially, Iowa, Nebraska, it's going to be that thick, really healthy loam that they can grow all that corn in, kind of the breadbasket of our country. And we're going to come back to this soil texture triangle at the end, but a quick little example of how you can quickly see what kind of soil you have is called the soil ribbon test. And if you pull a soil sample from your yard and kind of get it really wet, and then try to make a soil ribbon out of it, squeezing your hands, clay, you're going to be able to form a pretty long ribbon with it. And then going, clay loam, it's going to be shorter. It's going to start falling apart. Loam, it's just going to be like a ½ inch maybe. And then once you get into that sandy, silty soils, you're not going to be able to really form anything. Okay, so common issues and solutions. I'm going to go over this really quickly, and we're going to go through each one more specifically. So some major issues that we see in Greeley: compaction, poor drainage, thatch. We're going to talk a lot about thatch in a second. Low nutrients, low or high pH, acidity, and pests, right? So some of the solutions for those: aeration, top dressing, some fertilizer, soil amendments, and an integrated pest management plan. All right, so aeration. We're going to talk about the two main tools in our tool bag for soil health are going to be aeration and top dressing. These are the ones that you can do at home pretty easily. Aeration is alleviating soil compaction by literally kind of digging in and puncturing little holes through that grass. And that allows that air, water, and nutrients to get down to where the roots can actually absorb it. Ideally, yard is aerated twice a year in the spring, and once in the spring and once in the fall. We're going to avoid aerating during midsummer. We're going to talk about that in a second. And then if you're going to aerate, you want to soak your yard pretty thoroughly, like about a day, 2 days beforehand. And that allows that soil to like really moisten up. And so when the aerator comes through, it's going to get a lot deeper than if it were dry, compacted soil, right? There's three main types of aerating, I should say. So there's plug aeration, which is literally, you've seen it around a ton. It's literally pulling little plugs of soil out, and then it's left on the soil and it breaks back down and adds that nutrients back into the soil. Slicing or spike aeration. This is just literally cutting little rows into grass. This is more typically used in large scale operations like golf courses, or parks or something like that. And a lot of times the slicing aeration, that's usually in combination with seeding. So it's like they add seed to those little rows. And the last one is liquid aeration. I know a lot of landscape companies offer this. It's more of like a chemical aeration where they add surfactants and different chemicals that actually kind of break down the soil texture a little bit more so that air and water nutrients can get in. But the most common type you're going to see is that plug aeration. And so we mentioned thatch before, and so how aeration can break up that thatch. So what is thatch exactly? Thatch is a layer under the grass that is comprised of living and dead material, dead shoots, stems, roots. And what it is it creates like a sponge between the grass and the soil. And if there's too much of it, the water has difficulty getting down to that root zone. Nutrients have difficulty getting down to the root zone. It is a living part of the plant as well. And so you kind of have to play a game with it, trying to get not too much, but not too little. And so I mentioned that you don't want to aerate in the middle of summers because when you're cutting down into that thatch zone, you are damaging the grass a little bit. And so if you're doing it in the middle of summer when it's the hottest out, it can kind of hurt it more than it helps. And so you want to wait till it's nice and cool, nice cool mornings, a little bit more natural rain, so that that grass can bounce back faster. So when you have a large amount of thatch, what it tells me is that that soil is having trouble breaking down the dead detritus part of the thatch and not leaving just the live part of it. And so what it tells me is that microbiome that we talked about in the beginning is not really functioning as it should. And so when you aerate and top dress, which we're going to talk about in the next slide, you're adding more nutrients in, you're helping that microbiome out to break down that thatch faster. So that's one way to get rid of thatch. If it gets too bad, you might have to physically get out there with a thatching rake and thatch it, like drag it out, collect it, get rid of it. Okay, so top dressing. After you aerate, this is a very important step, top dressing with compost. So you're literally what top dressing means is spreading out a thin layer of some type of organic compost over your yard. You can spread it with a spreader like on the picture on the right, but a lot of times you can just pile it and then rake it in with a rake. And what this does, it reduces compaction. It helps with that thatch, as we mentioned. And especially in Greeley, since we have that really kind of high soil type that really retains that water, the compost is really good at holding water, but kind of in a loose way that's going to be really available for the plants to extract. You can also level your yard with top dressing. So if you have a really bumpy, a lot of little pits in your yard, you can spread that topsoil flat and the grass will grow through it, and then it'll just create a nice even level yard for you. There's a lot of different brands out there. I don't have a very specific one, but there's a lot of different places you can buy it for pretty cheap. You can buy it in bulk too, where they just kind of deliver in the back of a dump truck and dump it in your front yard. Yeah. Sorry, the question was if I had a very specific brand of compost that I suggest, and I really don't. It's just whatever is available out there. And we're going to talk about kind of nutrient levels of different things in a second. You can also add seed into that compost as well to get down and add some grass to some bare spots. All right, so like I said, the aeration and top dressing are our main two tools in our bag, right? But let's say you do that and your yard is still kind of struggling, then you have to kind of start digging a little deeper. No pun intended, but figuring out what else is going on with that soil in your grass, right? And so that's when you might want to get a soil test done. CSU has a great one. I put their website on there, but if you just Google CSU Soil Lab, their website will come up. I believe it's like about $45 to get the whole test done. You can do like just the macro nutrients, and they'll be a little bit cheaper. But what a soil test will provide you is your nutrient levels. They'll send back macronutrients and then micronutrients. The macronutrients are the big three, the NPK. We're going to talk about that a lot in a second. And then the micronutrients, which is like your boron, your zinc, your other small stuff. The micronutrients, turf and most plants need them at such small levels that they are usually can be found in compost pretty easily. And so, but it's the macronutrients that are usually the issue. The soil test will also give you pH and salinity. In Greeley, we don't have a huge issue with that, with pH or salinity. There is some soil amendments that you can put down to fix those issues. We don't see it very often in Greeley. If you find that you do have a pH or salinity issue, give me a call and we can work through what what to put down to fix that. And then also in the soil test, they're going to give you recommendations. The recommendations are going to be in pounds per 1,000 square feet. And so what that is good for is we want to avoid over fertilizing. If you ever heard of like an algae bloom in a lake or something like that, those are most typically caused by fertilizer runoff, right? And so if you're putting too much fertilizer down and you water your grass or it rains really hard, that excess fertilizer is going to go into our drainage system, into our lakes, into the pooter, and cause some issues down the road. So we want to avoid that. And so we're going to talk about how to avoid that by knowing what is in our fertilizer, right? So if everybody knows what the have ever seen the three numbers on fertilizer, what that is your fertilizer ratio. It's the 30 numbers stand for nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, NPK, right? And each number indicates the percentage of that nutrient in the fertilizer. So in this example right here, a fertilizer with a ratio of 10-10-10 would have 10% nitrogen, 10% phosphorus, and 10% potassium, right? Nitrogen is really used to green up the grass. A lot of golf courses use nitrogen just to get it really nice and green and luscious. Phosphorus is more for a healthy root zone, and then potassium is for just like the overall health of the plant. And so over on the left, you can see an example of a bag of fertilizer. It has 18% nitrogen, 24% phosphorus, and 22% potassium, or 12% potassium, sorry. Some other examples at the bottom, 25, 5, 10. There's all kinds of ratios out there. After you know your fertilizer ratio, you can talk about how much to actually apply for it. So I have a little example for us to do. It's a little bit of math, nothing difficult. If let's say you get a soil test from CSU and it recommends to apply 1 pound per 1,000 square feet of nitrogen to your yard. Your yard is 3,000 square feet, let's say, and the fertilizer you purchase is 25, 5, 10, so 25% nitrogen in that bag. What you want to do is just put your desired nutrient in pounds, so 1 pound over the percentage of nutrients in the bag as a decimal, so 1 pound of nitrogen over 25 or 0.25% in the bag. That equals 4 pounds of fertilizer per 1,000 square feet. And then that's 1,000 square feet. You have a 3,000 square feet, so you need to simply multiply that by 3, 12 pounds of that fertilizer total to spread across your 3,000 square foot lawn. Pretty simple. I am going to talk real quick. I didn't really make a slide for this about the differences between organic fertilizer and synthetic fertilizer. Organic fertilizers, that compost does count as an organic fertilizer. Most compost that you buy, it's not going to have this very specific ratio for you. It's just going to be general nutrient-rich compost. But you can buy organic fertilizers, which is it's slow releasing. So you spread it out and it's going to release those nutrients very slowly, probably throughout the entire summer. Synthetics fertilizers are a pure, almost chemical, and they are immediately available to the plant, but they don't last very long. And you need to be really careful with synthetic fertilizers, because if you put too much down, it can cause what's called nitrogen burn, and it'll basically kill your plants pretty quickly. All right. So that's, do I have any questions about fertilizer, composting, aerating, anything like that? Integrated pest management plan. So this is from the USDA. This is just a IPM, integrated pest management, IPM triangle. The main three ones that we're going to kind of focus on today are cultural and physical and biological. Cultural and physical are the most common ones that you're going to do in a residential situation. Cultural is kind of what we've already talked about today, creating a super healthy landscape that pests can't really get into. You know, especially a Kentucky bluegrass, a turf that's really healthy is going to outcompete any weeds that are start growing there. So that's the first step that you kind of want to do is just make sure that everything is healthy and happy in your yard, and you're not going to see as many weeds. The next is physical. This is directly killing the pests, hand weeding, pulling those Japanese beetles off the leaves, you know, and then the last one is biological, a little bit more rare in a residential situation, but this is using natural predators to manage the pests. So bringing in the ladybugs for aphids and, you know, parasitic wasp for other things. Japanese beetle is a unique situation because it's not native, so it doesn't have a lot of natural predators, right? The question was what eats Japanese beetles? Yeah, and it's a really tough one, and I think a lot of people are dealing with that situation. We can talk a little bit more after this class about that specific thing. The main thing I want to talk about is that chemicals only as a last resort. So insecticides, pesticides, you're going to try to avoid that until it's too late to really do any other things for it. Especially those insecticides. The Japanese beetles, their larva stages, they lay under the grass and it eats the crown of the roots. And if you spray insecticides into a soil, you're kind of killing that microbiome that is so important to break down for thatch. And so you're just kind of almost causing more issues than the actual Japanese beetle would, at least at the larva stage. You're kind of weighing your options when it comes to insecticides. We're going to kind of shift gears now, talking about new lawns, seeding and sodding. And you can also, you know, I say new lawns, but, you know, if you have a section of your lawn that has died and you want to get it back, this is good, good practice to keep in mind. So for both seeding and sodding, there's a few differences between the two, obviously, but for the main part, it's going to all be pretty much the same. So the best time to seed or sod is in the early fall, when it's kind of mid-August to early October, when it starts getting cool out, but not too cold, but not too hot, right? Turfgrass really enjoys like those really cool fall mornings, but when it gets sunny and warmer in the afternoon. And so that's the best time to lay sod or seed. We really highly recommend, if you're going to seed or sod, to rototill the soil before you seed. And apply we say 4 cubic yards per 1,000 square feet of compost, about 1 or 2 inches thick across the whole area that you're reseeding or sodding, and then rototill that pretty deep, 6 to 8 inches deep. And that just allows for those seeds and those new roots to like really take hold pretty quickly. Seed, you can broadcast that. You can, they have the little push broadcasters that can spread it out really evenly. If you don't have one of those, you can, what we call feed the chickens, just spread the seed out by hand, and then kind of like gently rake it in to wherever you're seeding. For sod, you know, it comes in those rolls. You just not really any major technique, just kind of alternate patterns so you don't have just huge seams running down the middle of your lawn. And then water. A new seed and sod needs a lot more water than established grass, right? So it's called an establishment watering period. And so in the first 1 to 2 weeks of seeding and sodding, you're going to want to water every single day, 4 times a day, you know, 5 to 10 minutes per day, per cycle as you water. Your goal is to keep that top layer of soil constantly moist throughout those 2 weeks, right? 3 to 4 weeks, once those roots start kind of gutting down, you want to water a little bit more and encourage those roots to grow even deeper. If you're always just watering that first few inches, the roots are just going to sit there because they're happy, you know, they don't need to go any deeper, but you really want to encourage them to go deeper. You know, week 5 plus, you're really going to try to get back to that, you know, 2-day a week, 3-day a week schedule, encouraging those roots to grow even deeper. I was out at an HOA not too long ago for an irrigation assessment, and they had new sod that had died, and they were wondering why. And I went into their irrigation clock and looked at it, and it was still on that every day for 5 to 10 minutes. And so it just never took hold. And I could still, like, weeks passed, and I could still just pull the sod up like a blanket off that topsoil. Yeah. And so so us for the city, we understand that, you know, you'll need a lot more water when you're making a new yard, when you're growing new grass. So we offer these variances, these special permissions basically to water your grass a lot more than you normally would, right? So it does add water to your water budget. I touched on this for anyone that was there last week in our irrigation class, but your water budget is for your indoor budget. It's the people in your how many people live in your household, 45 gallons per person per day, times how many days are in that billing cycle. And that's your indoor budget. And then your outdoor budget is the square footage of your irrigable area of your home, right? Local weather conditions, an irrigation factor, and that's your outdoor budget. And those things combined is your budget for your whole household. And so what a variance will do is increase that budget enough to water get that plants established for that month. And also it allows you to water during the day, because we know in those first few weeks you're going to need to keep that water wet, or that soil wet, all day long. So with a variance, you can kind of water outside the restrictions and water during the day. All right, so mowing and some maintenance. Mowing is really important, and people don't really think about this that often, but during peak season, you want to mow every 5 to 7 days, right? You want to mow when it's dry, and then you want to mow frequently where you're only cutting off about 1/3 of that grass blade. If you let your grass grow really long and then you chop off half or 2/3 of it, that's really going to damage most of that plant. And so it's going to be more susceptible to disease and injury and stuff like that. And then you want to ensure that your mower blades are sharp. If they become dull, instead of cutting, they're more like whipping and tearing that grass off. And that's going to also cause a really quick way for plant infections to get into your turf, or that damage is going to really hurt your plant. Another thing is, we highly suggest not collecting your grass clippings. All that grass clippings is full of nutrients, and so once that falls to the ground, it can just add nutrients back into the soil. And so when you collect it and throw it away, you're just removing nutrients from your soil. Also, pretty easy one, don't mow in the same pattern every single time. Change it up, mow different directions. If you mow in the same direction every time, that plant can start literally falling on its side and just staying there, which it'll be more susceptible to diseases that way as well. Getting close to the end of it, our take-home tip for the day is the soil jar test. This is a fun way to find out exactly what your soil in your very specific yard is. And so what you'll need is a clear, straight-sided jar, a soil sample from your yard. I would suggest kind of getting multiple spots throughout the yard, get like an accumulation of like what it is in your whole yard. Some water and about a teaspoon of dishwasher detergent. What you're going to do is you're going to fill the jar about halfway with your soil, fill the rest of the jar up with water, and add your detergent, cap it, and shake it vigorously, and then set it down and don't touch it. And as that detergent's going to kind of separate those soils out, and as it separates out, you're going to literally see different layers form. And so with that, you can find the percentage of which one and find out and use the soil texture triangle to find out exactly what soil you have. So we're going to go through a more specific example, but it's pretty much the layer height divided by the total height of the soil in the jar, and then multiplied by 100, and that'll give you your percentage, right? So for our example, it's a 6-inch total in the soil height in the jar. You have 3 inches of clay, 2 inches of silt, and 1 inch of sand, right? So you divide 3 inches for the clay part. You divide 3 divided by 6 times 100 equals about 50% clay. For the silt, 2 divided by 6 times 100, that's about around 30% silt. And then the sand, 1 divided by 6 times 100, around 16% clay. And then in the soil texture triangle, you can find the different percentages of each of the 3 types. Follow the lines back. And for this one, you're going to see, I know it's a little small, but 50% clay followed across 30% sand. You're already just sitting in the clay area, and then 16% sand. It's going to give you right in the clay area. So your majority clay, and you see clay is like a big portion of that. Clay is so prominent that it's going to, any high percentage of clay in your soil, it's going to be labeled as clay. All right. And so that's about it for us. But how we can help you from the city's perspective, we have rebates for irrigation equipment, toilets for small businesses. We do offer landscape and irrigation assessments where I can come out to your house, take some soil samples, go through your irrigation system. I'll write up a report about what all the things I find and give it to you. Makes it a little bit easier. We have this really great resource called the Greeley Plant Database. It's at plantsforGreeley.com. You can go on there and you can kind of click what kind of plants you want, how big you want it, what color you want it, and it'll bring up exactly what you're kind of looking for. Really great resource. And then we have a few income qualified programs, Flush and Flow for toilets, Lilac for landscapes. And that's it. Again, I'm Jake Robinson. I'm the water efficiency specialist. This is my cell phone and my work number. My email's on that too. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions whatsoever. I'll do my best to help you any way I can. All right. Thank you, everybody.